would say the book is being roundly panned by both Peter O'Reilly and Brendan Fanning in their various ways. At one stage in the middle of the interview, Fanning describes the book really as a house party where the kitchen is locked and the beer is in the fridge. And Peter O'Reilly shares the same sense that we didn't really get what we wanted from this book.
I'm intrigued by the lack of any affection in the Rugby writers towards Joe Schmidt. And, you know, as somebody who has never interviewed him, a lot of my awareness of Schmidt, the man, is garnered from late show appearances where he's almost this Huckleberry Finn type of character. Oh, shucks, you know, thanks, Ryan, for saying such a nice thing. And yet, anecdotally, he's a pretty ruthless individual when it comes to his coaching, and rules by fear is an expression I've read a lot of times. And what I see here is that this has been right across the board, the lack of warmth towards him from the rugby media.
Yeah.
You know, even we were out at a function last night, I had this argument with somebody where they were saying that they believed him to have ultimately been a failure. And I said, well, that's an outrageous thing to say, given all of the things he's achieved. But he was using the World Cup as the ultimate measure of, you know, did he make us better in a World Cup? And the answer is no. But, you know, his achievements are extraordinary.
Sport is about more than the World Cup.
Absolutely. Sure. And the achievements, he is categorically the best Irish rugby coach we've ever had, following two outstanding coaches in Declan Kidney, who won a Grand Slam, and Eddie O'Sullivan, who won 3 Triple Crowns. So we have had a period of extraordinary success in Irish rugby, but he brought it to another level. And it's just a real pity that it ended so flatly.
Yeah.
But it's very striking. I mean, Peter is really, really dismissive of the book.
Well, the headline is World Cup glossed over in Ordinary Joe, a very ordinary read. That's the headline.
No, the subhead is even more telling. Joe Schmidt, a coach so focused on detail, omits plenty in his dull new book. And he uses the word dull repeatedly throughout.
The impression I get from the rugby writers is that they actually see a conceit even in the title.
Ordinary Joe.
Ordinary Joe.
Yeah.
That he clearly is not an ordinary Joe. But in putting that as the title of your book, it's almost conceited to do it. But like, the tone of it is captured here with Peter writing, this largely dull, unrevealing book stretches to 327 pages, yet Schmidt's analysis of the defeat by Japan, a pivotal career moment, amounts to a mere 3 paragraphs, consisting of complaints about referee Angus Gardner and praise for the Japanese. And that's the tone of it. And you know, Rory O'Connor in our paper during the week was very much of the same vein, that this feeling that he hasn't taken responsibility for what went wrong in Japan. And, you know, it really went wrong that day, particularly against the hosts, where he didn't pick Johnny Sexton, for example. And there was a sense that he was playing the long game, that we were already having beaten the Scots, we were already in the quarterfinals. And just the whole flatness of the year in general, when you look at the performances that bookended the Six Nations, the opening day defeat against England at the Aviva, and then a lamentably poor performance in Cardiff against the Welsh in the rain. And there was a kind of a stasis or something about the team right through the year, and that's not really dealt with, it seems, in the book. I haven't read the book, I have to say. I'm not sure I will read it, you know, looking at the reviews.
I'm about 15 pages in, so, I mean, I'm not, I can't say this has whetted the appetite massively. And just so there's no conflict of interest, I'm doing 2 evenings where I'm interviewing him. And so, I mean, I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully that can still be a good conversation and you can maybe get more out of it. And one of the criticisms levelled here is the lack of ghostwriter. It means that maybe you need someone to push and go, well, hang on, we need a bit more on that, and we need a bit more on that. Because if you do look at his, you know, someone, I think it's Peter O'Reilly, or it's Brendan, excuse me, but one of them makes the point that you can boil down his explanation for what went wrong into almost a single line, which is effectively that they stopped prioritising the next match and the week ahead.
And
then confidence ebbs away and suddenly you lose momentum, and it's very hard to kind of get the thing back on track. And I kind of accept that as a fair enough theory as to what went wrong. And when you think about it, that's a big admission in a way. That means you mismanaged the approach the entire year, the crucial year. You know, that's a big failing. But I suppose it's the lack of detail.
Lack of
around it that
detail,
people
exactly.
want.
I mean,
But it is a big admission. You're like, because he says someone texted him from the New Zealand camp saying, yeah, we did the same in 07. We put the World Cup ahead of everything else, and it just made it, you know, it didn't work out for us.
Yeah.
So you can kind of say that's
like,
your choice, and that's a big admission of failure in a way, but people seem to want a bit more.
Well, I think it's understandable they want a bit more, because everything about him is so detailed up until this point, if you like.
Yeah.
He goes into such detail over everything. And I was saying to you, I interviewed him about 3 months before the World Cup for a magazine piece that wasn't going to appear until around the World Cup. And I remember him saying to me, and I put it back over it a few times because I was surprised he said it, and I said, how do you feel about the World Cup? And he said, I'm terrified. And I thought that was a very strange thing for the manager of the senior team to be saying. And I said, really terrified? And he went, yeah, terrified. We've never got past quarter-final. He seemed to be obsessed with it. The thing about the book, I think, that's interesting, and Vincent has ghostwritten books, is some of the best books involve another person, because they're the ones who are really going to draw the stuff out of you that you don't want to talk about, that may be central to who you are and what you've done. And so I'm really surprised, first of all, that he's brought out a book. I suspect the man doesn't sleep at all. Well, he seems to me one of those people who never turns off. And I remember asking him and saying to him, do you not sleep before games? And he said, no, I sleep like a log before games because I've everything done. After we lose, I can't sleep. So you'd imagine that this is just like keeping a diary. All this stuff has been done all the time. He's constantly in motion. But a ghostwriter, I think, that's what surprised me, is that, first of all, it's come out so quickly. No time for reflection, really, and the World Cup is just kind of stuck onto it. I haven't read it yet either. And secondly, that there wasn't. But the lack of a ghostwriter reflects so much of what we know, which is that he, as a coach, he wanted to control everything, and he wanted to control the media as well. And the media, clearly, rugby media have struggled badly with that element of it. And there is an element of all managers trying to control the media, but it seems to have been extreme in this case.
I think that lack of a ghostwriter, it's actually captured by the rigour with which Brendan, in his interview with Sunday Independent, asks some questions. And, you know, for example, it's really bizarre to me that he doesn't name his mum or dad in the book, as if it's some kind of breaking a code of privacy. I mean, really, why? You know, it just seems a really bizarre thing. And Brendan grills him on this. But also, there's a really interesting thing where he talks about his granddad changing his name during the Second World War.
That's really
Schmidt
interesting.
to Smith, because they were getting bricks through the window. And you're just thinking, I think he's one of the most interesting figures we've ever had in Irish sport.
Yeah.
And it just seems such a wasted opportunity that we're not going to learn more about him. That it seems to be large tracks of the book seem to be a coaching manual almost.
I think if you could broadly break it up into 3 parts based on Rory's review of it, the opening part is maybe his childhood, I suppose, or, you know, his kind of formative years. But again, things like not mentioning his father by name is striking. Or his mother by name. Yeah. And then the middle section is almost his philosophy. You know, so there's a chapter on how he handles the media. There's a chapter on, you know, the mental aspect of the game, all that kind of stuff. And then the final third is a diary of the 2018 Grand Slam winning year, followed by a diary of the 2019 World Cup. That's it. So even with Brendan Fanning, and certainly with Keith Duggan yesterday, he concedes it's not a straightforward autobiography.
No, it's not. Yeah.
He says at one stage, I've read lots of autobiographies and I find them interesting, but I don't necessarily get anything from them or a real insight into how they think. It's a whole lot of events they're involved in, but not quite how they think. So that's an insight into what he was aiming to do with it. So part coaching manual maybe to a point for aspiring coaches to see how this guy approached aspects of the job.
Do you know what I'm struck by? I think a lot of the Irish public will be a little bit confused by the attitude of the media towards him, in the sense that we all had those pictures of the day they were beaten by New Zealand in the World Cup, and all of the supporters reaching out to grab his hand and thank him for everything. And I can see there's a kind of two parallel worlds here, where you have the media who have one view of him. And it's very funny where Brendan asks him about including a chapter on the media in the book. And I find his response really, really interesting. He said, the media chapter was longer than that because I started off saying how the world has changed for the media And I had a couple of things about the big takeovers, not your one, which is too recent, but more in the last couple of years and how tough it is in the current environment where change is almost a constant. You're being sold to people or there's a change in emphasis. I talked a little about the pressures to get something.
On journalists, yeah.
Now, I don't think there's a rugby writer that would see that as sincere. I think they would say, my God, Joe, please, don't come up with that kind of idea that you cared for the media and the pressure they were under, when he was very controlling of the media message that was getting out there. Again, I'm only getting this anecdotally from the writers, but if you said anything remotely critical of Joe, it came back to you and you were told in no uncertain terms that that was not well thought of. So I think there's a deep insincerity to that answer that he gives to Brendan about the media, and it's very hard to think anyone would read it and not see a certain insincerity in that.
Brendan comes at it from very interesting angles, all right, like that trying to get to the heart of why he doesn't talk about his family and the family history and lots of stuff, but also that media thing is interesting because he cites him talking the cosy setting from his time assisting Vern Cotter in Bernard Platey, where the local journalists used to travel on the team bus and pop up regularly in the changing room. Now, what Brendan says is he was, I think he's quoting him saying he was local, trusted and positive by nature, and the access he had to the team and players was much greater than I've experienced since. And Brendan said, it sounds like the man was so deeply embedded he should have written his name on the soles of his shoes. And there is this conflict where it always appeared to seem that Joe expected the national media here to be rah-rahing for the team always and couldn't cope with it when they didn't. And I suppose he also mentions here the fact that there's only a very, very passing to the Belfast rape case as well in this book, and again that's something that people probably would have expected him to elaborate on.
Well, he actually says that Penguin advised him against going into any detail on the rape case.
Well, it's something I'm planning to talk to him about, so we'll have to see how that goes.
But I think Brendan's...
If we step back from the media thing for a second, just to deal with that, and you talk about his popularity, his enduring popularity, and I watched him on the Late Late Show on Friday, and find myself just warming to him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Incredibly charming.
Yeah.
And I think it's right when someone says, look, we understand this is sport, this can happen. It's not like you wanted this to happen, and that's, it's not like you should be persecuted or judged or shunned in any way. And there is a bigger picture to the 2 World Cups. And 2015, like even Luke Fitzgerald in his podcast, who was involved, and very miffed he didn't start that game against Argentina, would still say, you lose 5 players, any team loses those 5 players, you're just not the same team. That's just a bit of bad luck. And okay, 2019 things have gone badly, but you can't ignore the other stuff, which was so successful. But on the media, so if we step back for a second, I think the reason those fans are still so on side and the general public is still so on side is they will look at the media and they will all consume it, and if there's a breaking story, it'll be the most read on a website because they want the information too. But I think they'll look at it and they'll say, well, Joe's attitude to the media, Joe Schmidt's attitude to the media is they are always shit-stirring, they're looking for stories, they're looking for angles, they're looking for info I don't want to get out yet, they're looking for the player who doesn't think Joe's a good coach. This is his attitude now, I'm not saying right or wrong, but his attitude ultimately boils down to, they don't help me. They don't help the players, and I just don't want them involved. And my priority is for Ireland to win rugby matches, not helping the media, so I'm going to give them as little as possible.
Of course, and perfectly understandable.
Yeah, and I think the general public's attitude is, yeah, damn right.
Well, my point,
do what you have to do.
Yeah, but my thing then is if you're going to write a book, be honest about that and say that's my attitude.
Fair point. Yeah. No, I'd accept that. Yeah, I'd accept that.
And I don't think that's reality. I don't think that's in the book. I haven't read the book either, but all the excerpts I've seen and everything I've seen of what he said, and I read the Keith Duggan piece very closely on Saturdays in Times as well, is that that's not what he's saying here. You know.
Fair enough.
I think the other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of is I think he's actually a very nice man. I think
by all accounts he seems to go all around the country giving his time for free or else for charity and doing talks and engaging with people and very personable, and you can discount all of that and say, that's PR stuff. But I mean, if you do it every day in, day out, week after week, then...
When I interviewed him and he could tell me about working in King's House with the kids, or not in the school up in the Midlands, he could tell you the names of the players who scored the tries when he coached these kids to a Leinster B title. Do you know what I mean? That's how much he cares about the game. That's how much he cares about players. That's how deeply he's rooted in his game. He really does care and seems to be a genuinely nice person. But has to be another side of him to be as successful as he
Well, it clearly is,
as a manager, and it's the difficulty in seeing that, or him revealing that to us. I think it probably leaves a gap.
Yeah, but part of me actually was totally in agreement with Brian O'Driscoll's what he said on the Late Late Show.
Yeah.
And,
I agree with that.
And I kind of said, yes, he deserves to hear those words because he has been phenomenal in Irish rugby.
Yeah, I think he's getting a very tough deal at the moment over 2019, personally. I think it went wrong, and it's a real pity his hooker was 37. He wasn't unaware of the fact. He did play Sean Cronin in Rome. He was trying to move that on. It's not ideal that Conor Murray goes from being the best scrum half in the world to one arm shrunk compared to the next, not fit.
Yeah.
It's not ideal that Johnny Sexton turned 34, and he's playing very well now, actually, and did okay in the World Cup, but that partnership wasn't what it was. All of these things are not ideal, and they are part of the story. Look,
well, I think there is some legitimate criticism, though, of the style that Ireland played, that attritional style, when you have such a shallow pool of players as well. Like, I do think that's something that probably I'd like to see him talk about. Or
well, he did.
well.
It was either with Keith or it's in this piece. I think it was with Keith Duggan yesterday. He did say, like, he laughs at the why don't Ireland offload a bit more. And he's like, we missed South Africa winning the World Cup.
I know, and that's the reality. Is a big beefy team of Man Mountains went and won the thing exactly. Yeah.
And you know what? The team that won the Grand Slam in 2018, it wasn't as if they were all singing, all dancing. They were something that we don't see in Irish sport very often, and that is clinical. I remember the game at Twickenham on St. Patrick's Day, and they were utterly clinical in what they did. And they had these little wrinkles in terms of their plays, but they'd only show them fleetingly. They weren't this offloading like the Japanese were in the World Cup. But they became a wonderful rugby team in 2018. And, you know, we didn't need them to play like the Barbarians to be wonderful to watch.
And I don't, people say, well, none of that counts because the World Cup. I don't think that's true.
I don't either, no.
Obviously,
I don't think that's true.
Obviously, the World Cup is more important, but I don't think 2018 wasn't a massive achievement.
No, it was. But also the problem for Schmidt always seemed to me is that he made the World Cup the barometer. He had constantly, repeatedly said, this will be my defining, this will define me, really. Everything else, this is what it's all been leading up to. And then when it all fell apart so badly, people will pile on, naturally.
But it definitely, look, I've heard the same stuff anecdotally from the rugby writers on the beat, and they're not all saying it for the hell of it. So, it was obviously, there was a lot of friction there, for sure, and I'm sure it wasn't all on them. I mean, it was Joe's approach as well.
But like you say, Joe, the general public really couldn't give a toss.
No,
about the media.
Couldn't care less. No, couldn't care less. It's funny when you talk, I've got to go to an ad break, when you talk about the lack of ghostwriter. And even I was thinking, your book with Paul McGrath just there, not only does he have a ghostwriter, but then you get other people involved in the story to tell other moments that Paul probably wouldn't like to have told himself. And that was probably no fun for him. But if you want to present the truth, not only does it need a ghostwriter, it might also need more than just the subject.
Yeah, but just reading Brendan's interview, it just gives you a flavour that there's so much more depth to this man that you'd love to explore and hear about. And it seems that we're not going to get that depth in the book.
Not yet, possibly. He says, I wrote it partly because I wanted to keep some control of my own story, is what he said to Brendan finally at one stage.
He seems to indicate, Joe, that he released it now because he thought that somebody else was going to write a book.
He certainly says he got wind from a player. Someone was going around talking to the players about him, On the Ordinary Joe thing, that's from an email he sent to a family friend after they beat the All Blacks, where the friend from New Zealand was saying, are you the same Joe Schmidt?
Guy.
And he wrote, he kind of quipped, I'm the same Ordinary Joe.
Yeah.
So Fanning says to him, it's not credible. And Schmidt says, you might say that, but I don't see it and I don't feel it. Sometimes I see it, the New Zealand job at the moment, and there's a lot of talk around. And one of my mates sent me this article yesterday saying that New Zealand desperately needs Joe. I don't see that. I see the headline, but I don't feel it. They'll do really well without me. They've great coaches and great people involved. So part of it is I'm trying to tell people I'm no different from what I was, is his response to that. So that's on page 2 and 3 of the Sunday Independent. No Ordinary Joe is the headline. So that's Brendan Fanning and Joe Schmidt, and Peter O'Reilly is writing about the book as well.